Hi everyone, hope you're well. This is CoinsKid, just going to XRP. Once again, thank you for your support. Okay, big old CoinsKid crew. So we saw a massive drop, didn't we, on Friday? Massive drop. But the signs were there, and the signs we've been looking at for many weeks. We've got a crystal ball with that pullback. We've got the LD that spiked 200% whenever you see that in the combo. You've got BTC above 70, Tether dominance below 30. You know, if you're buying there, you're doing it wrong, which I relay to you. And obviously what we've got as well is the S&P 500 hitting that 2 fib. And the whole time I've said to you, that would be confluence to some kind of pullback in the markets. Once we hit that 2 fib, every single time since the bottom in January 2023, when we broke out for the S&P 500, every time we ran into a fib, we have experienced a pullback in crypto. So I said to you, I don't think this time will be exempt from that. So the next time, the next thing I'm looking at, providing we can hold this correction that we're going through the S&P, come back out, I'm looking at 2.272. So stay tuned for that particular analysis, okay? Because that's where the next big crash and correction, in my opinion, occurs in crypto, because this is the king of risk, okay? Whatever this is doing, your minnows of risk, which is your XRP, Bitcoin, so on and so forth, they will follow suit, okay? So this is why I track this, confidence my analysis. So anyone paying attention will know, as soon as you hit that 2 fib, I said to you, expect volatility in the correction. That's exactly what we've seen here for crypto. So going forward, this has been my primary for a very long time. For anyone tuning in, you know, a lot of people turned off and didn't want to hear that, but like I said to you, we are making lower highs here. So this is bearish market structure in the short term, and usually typically we get towards the apex, we get compressed, and then we drop to the downside. And that's been my primary for a very long time, and the data was stacking up. The S&P, it's in the 2 fib, the LD spiking like that, 200% is something that shouldn't be ignored. That's people taking money off the table, massive pump on that. And obviously the crystal ball as well, showing that big drop into mid-October, which is exactly what we've got. Okay, so far so good. Is this the bottom of the correction? Hopefully. Hope's a dangerous word, but what I'm looking at right now, I relayed this to the CoinsKid crew, if it is the bottom of the correction, okay, what I'm hoping for right now, and hope is obviously a dangerous word, you shouldn't rely on hope, it is structure and data that we have to respect, but I just hope that flash crash was mother of all bear traps and XRP gets sent into orbit into Q4. Now I patiently wait for a V-shaped recovery and a bottom to print in the charts. The one thing that does concern me is the loss of the 190 low in this flash crash on Friday. So the fact that XRP came down in that flash crash and it lost this 190, it changes that this move here is impulsive. Okay, it looks like a free wave move, which is corrective. This is why I've been looking at this support, key support. Now a lot of people say ignore it and things like that, but it is the data. It would indicate that all this move here is, none of it has been impulsive for XRP. It's all been corrective, which is actually good news. And the reason it's good news is because you've not seen a fifth wave yet, which is missing in the charts for XRP. So I'll go through that with you, that this could actually be the last leg to the downside, where we potentially carve out and fill this wick over the next few weeks and then rocket into space for XRP in a final fifth wave, which just hasn't printed in the charts right now. And then it could line up with obviously the waterfall in the Bitcoin dominance, and many other things that we're looking at to call the top. One of the primary things I'm looking at, obviously for anyone that's been paying attention, is the LD. We need to see the LD in an uptrend, and this is typically what we see in bear markets or big macro crashes and corrections. We start to see the LD in an uptrend, so we need to pay attention to that because it is still in a downtrend. And obviously we're riding the waves. Whenever it spikes up, expect a pullback. Whenever you see that big drop and massive negativity in the LD, expect a pump for crypto. So we'll dive into the chart to see what we can see, but the loss of the 190 is obviously a little bit concerning. Not overly concerning, because obviously there was a lot of manipulation on Friday. A lot of people are saying that Binance bots and things like that pulled the plug, and it was just all market manipulation potentially. We did see something quite similar, I think it was March of 2020, the Corona dump right there, and obviously for XRP as well, I think late December 2020 we see a lot massive sell-off. And each one of those, if you look at the charts, what happened over the next few weeks, it carved out a structural bottom. It was a reversal ascending triangle on that particular wick. So this is what we've got to be patient for. We could jump up and say, okay, that was the bottom, that was a flash crash, it was a bear trap, fantastic. But like I've taught you, structure is boss. We've got to be patient for that structural bottom. If we can stay above the BMS, if we can stay above this neckline, which currently are, carve out some kind of ascending triangle down there, and we start to break and we see a waterfall in the Bitcoin dominance, all thumbs up to that big Q4 finish, okay? And it would be a very powerful finish as well, because all of this has not been any impulsive move for XRP. It's been corrective, and we may have actually seen the final shakeout before the big breakout, which is obviously the news we want to hear, okay, going forward. But again, I just respect the data. All I do is respect the data and relay that to you on this channel. I hope you understand that. There's no bear boy, bull boy, or whatever. It's just things that I see in the charts, okay? So I was a little bit micro bearish for XRP because of this descending level of resistance and lower high structure. Like I said to you, typically you get towards the apex and you see a flash crash. It came, obviously, a lot deeper than I anticipated, to be honest with you. And for that, I hold my hands up. I'm sorry. I didn't envision that big, massive sell-off. But currently, respectfully, we're doing exactly what I did think we would do. We've come down. We're holding a BMS. We've bounced off this God candle back test. We're at about 235. We're holding this neckline. So we could be gearing up for this beautiful finish into Q4. So let's dive into the charts and see what we can see, okay? So liquidity dance is a really important indicator made for the CoinsKid crew. It's an inverse correlation indicator. It's daily liquidity coming in out of the market. It's not necessarily a crystal ball, which is basically lagging liquidity based on M2 global money supply sloshing around in the world. This is based on daily liquidity reporting, and you can clearly see that since it's an inverse correlation, you know, we've got this beautiful white line, which is your LD, your liquidity dance. It's basically trending up, trending up, trending up, trending up. And what's Bitcoin and XRP doing since, you know, April 2021? We're all fully aware, trending down basically. So you've got this whopping downtrend that lasted from literally, when was that, April 2021 to late 2022. So basically, you know, a year and a half. It was a very long correction that Bitcoin and XRP went through, you know. So I think the confluence is within the LD itself, and I've gone through this a million times until I'm blue in the face, that was your top for Bitcoin. Came down the A, come up in the B. This is a bull trap. And then dropped in the C. So it was a perfect ABC zigzag correction, okay, that met the 1.618. And we may go through something similar, okay, for Bitcoin and XRP in the future, but at the minute I just need to see more data. And one of the key data points I'm looking at is obviously at that time frame when the big macro correction did come into play for XRP and Bitcoin at a time where, you know, Bitcoin came down, made that higher high, but XRP made the lower high later in the year and then dropped and pretty much bottomed the same time, late 2022, early 2021. Was really simple. It was the LD leaving the market. So this again is confluence of the fact that this was a bull trap move with Bitcoin, spoofing from FTX or whatever, I don't know, but something wasn't right there with Bitcoin. It was some kind of bull trap later in the year, because I hold my hands up, even myself was expecting that blow off top because of the 4-year cycle theory. We have the blow off top into Q4 of 2021, but obviously it came up, XRP made the low high and then dropped. When it dropped, you know, my projection changed, and my projection will change again in the future if the data tells me to do that. Okay, please remember that. So I was projecting Bitcoin to come down. You know, we met all the buying targets, fantastic, 1.618 for anyone paying attention. And obviously the XRP 1414 fib, beautiful buy zone, came down, bounced like a boss, and it's been trending up ever since. Okay, but at some point we will come in for that macro correction. Is it now? I don't know. Okay, but what I'm looking for is a key data point where the LD does exactly what it did there. It starts to trend up at that point, okay, and you're making lower highs and lower lows. Once it starts to do something like that, boom, you've got to respect the data. You have to look at the liquidity coming out of the market, and then liquidity is being withdrawn. At the moment, it's not. So this is why I'm not massively macro bearish, as you know, a lot of people out there. Okay, so I'm just respecting the data. I hope you understand that. So far so good. I'm just looking at the LD as a clue, and obviously the S&P 500, and obviously the crystal ball as well. So let's take a look at the crystal ball, the XRP chart, see what we can see. Okay, so looking at the S&P 500 with a crystal ball, again the peaks and troughs, beautiful right now, isn't it? So basically the S&P 500, if you take a look, the crystal ball was still trending up, okay, into I think early into the spring of 2022, but the S&P 500 already began its downtrend. But if you take a look, they pretty much bottomed at the same time. So the S&P 500 printed a very bullish statement in January 2023. Just there, it printed a very bullish statement. It really was simple, and it's something I relayed to you at the time, okay, for anyone paying attention. I was anticipating this 5-wave move down. It was an overlapping broadening wedge, basically, and you come down into the same resistance. And just like Bitcoin, taking out the neckline, I said to you, it was a very bullish statement. At the same time, Bitcoin did it as well. It broke above its 20-week EMA, and I think at the time XRP was doing really well as well. It sort of broke down in January in 5 waves. We were buying there, and it was part of the confluence. Okay, we've seen 5 waves for XRP. 5 waves down, you buy, and with that, what we've got is basically a break above this relative resistance for the S&P 500 and its 20-week EMA, and obviously Bitcoin as well. So at that point, go back to the videos, with the 5 waves down in XRP, I was buying as much as I could, and obviously Bitcoin as well. And the S&P 500 was given the clue that we was going to experience something like this, where XRP was going to flourish and come upstairs. And it's done exactly that. But as this thing comes up, and again, please respect this, and this is something I've always spoken to you about, as this thing comes up, okay, in 5 waves, if you're buying right there, you're doing it wrong. Okay, so please stay tuned. I think these times will come again where everything feels like it's going to drop into oblivion and things like that, and your optimal buying entry points with less risk appear in the charts again. Okay, so please stay tuned. I'll relay that message to you in time again. Obviously people don't know way, pretty much like the word back then as well, but the clues are in the data points of other charts, not just XRP. Okay, so there's a lot of confluence at that time, beautiful buying opportunity, and I relayed that to you, and we've had an amazing ride so far. But as this comes up, okay, and it's approaching 5-wave territory, this is where we have to, you know, exercise a level of caution. This is what I said to you. If you're buying XRP now, if you're buying these coins now and things like that, you are taking on risk, okay? Because this is where you buy, you buy your blood, you buy your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on XRP to the downside, not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the upside, or 1, 2, 3. You're taking on risks basically. So, these times will come again. So please stay tuned to the channel. So just a 5-wave move, broke out, fantastic, been coming up ever since. But every single time in this chart we hit a fib, what happens? We have a correction in crypto. So this is why at this point I said to you, when we hit the 2 fib, expect some kind of correction in crypto, and we're pretty much getting that. So we can hold this support, the BMS, and again, this is a really important indicator for the CoinsKid crew, the bull market support, get into your charts. It's telling you right now, believe it or not, we are in a bull trend, we're in an uptrend for the S&P 500. But I'm looking for more data in this chart to flip incredibly macro bearish on XRP. And once we do, we just look at this chart to give us a clue when to buy XRP again, okay? Because it's the optimal entry point, just like it was there, because the trend is changing in the king of risk. So at the moment, we don't necessarily see anything other than the fact we've ran into the 2 fib that the trend has changed, okay? So this is why we have to apply a little bit of caution, go through some kind of correction. If we can hold support and start to come back out, boom, you're on a 2.272. So one of the key clues could be the fact that what we're seeing right now is a massive liquidation event in crypto, but we're not necessarily seeing it in the S&P 500. So if we zoom to the left, the last time we experienced such a massive crash in magnitude in crypto was here in the Corona dump, okay? And obviously the S&P 500 was indicative of that as well. So the S&P 500 came down the black swan and V-shaped out of there. Now we take a look at this little leg here to the downside. One chart's lying. Is it the S&P 500 or is it XRP? Because we've seen that massive, liquidation event on Friday for XRP. So it may be a case that, we're not necessarily experiencing this massive bloodbath in crypto at this particular time frame, and it is actually a bear trap leading into a breakout to the upside. But we've got to keep an eye on the S&P 500, because obviously if the S&P 500 starts to do something like that, then XRP will go to zero, won't it? I'm not saying it will, but wow, what kind of crash could we experience if the S&P 500 does do that? So this is why I think one of the charts is lying. Is it S&P 500 or is it Bitcoin or is it XRP or whatever? For me, I think it's the latter. I think the S&P 500 is the clue. We ran into the 2 fib, we're having a crash and correction, and I think there's just been a massive, some kind of market manipulation, to be honest with you. Otherwise, the S&P 500 would have done exactly what it did there in March of 2020, which is pretty much what we've seen across the board for crypto. So there's no bias on this channel. I'm always looking at other charts for clues. What I think we've got right now, we're running to a 2 fib, going through a crash and correction as anticipated, kick back, let this crash and correction play out in the S&P. It will give us more clues to the future of XRP, okay, going forward. But if we hold this support on the BMS, then I think there's a turnaround to the 2.272 fib for this particular chart in time, okay? So keep an eye on the S&P 500. Let's dive into the XRP chart right now to see what we can see, okay? So looking at XRP on a weekly time frame, now what I would like to see here on this particular chart is a basically reversal, okay? It's some kind of bottom pattern, ascending triangle or whatever over a long period of time. Basically a couple of weeks, we need to see some kind of reversal here. Or obviously the alternative is we get around straight above all this resistance, hold support, then we've got a V-shaped recovery here that's very quick. Now this is primary resistance. Technically what we've got, support, flush through in a God candle back test, you can clearly see that. And this is where we're tracing to. So expect some kind of resistance on that God kind of back test. So we need to get as many points of contact as we can. We've got that key support there, support there, and then we flushed it in that big drop on Friday, okay? So this now becomes resistance. It's really simple technical analysis. Your floor becomes your ceiling, okay? So right now that's resistance, around about 2.27215. So I would expect some kind of resistance at that point. If we don't get resistance, obviously it'll be a little bit more concerning that you're not carving out some kind of structural bottom. Now, what do I mean by this? So technically, if we look at historical data within these charts, when we see these flushes, you do come up and you carve out some kind of ascending triangle, okay, where you're making a series of level highs, and high lows into compression that lead to expansion to the upside. It's the opposite of descending triangle, where you're coming down, making lower highs into support, you compress, and you break to the downside, which has been my primary for a very long time. So we need to see the reversal of that on this wick, basically, and we need to see it really soon, because if we don't, obviously you're going to fall out of the BMS, you're going to start to break down, and you're going to begin to feel some of this wick, okay? So this is what we need to pay attention to. So if we move to the left on the daily, I can show you exactly what I'm looking at. Basically where we've seen these big wicks before. I think we had one in 2020, wasn't it? Where was it? Just here, we've got this massive drop, okay, huge drop, and you're creating this ascending triangle on the big wick where you're doing something like this. Over a few days, you've got, basically higher highs, level highs into resistance of high lows, and you break out, back test the ascending triangle, and you're off. Okay, and then again, if we look at the Corona dump of 2020, This could be what we're looking at over a few weeks. I don't necessarily think we're going to get a breakout straight away, because you can clearly see here as well, you've got your breakdown on your God candle back test. It becomes resistance, but you're making high lows into resistance, and this is what we need to keep an eye on in the current time frame. Then what you start to do, you compress, you break out, you fall back to its support, making the higher low from which you come, and then boom, you're breaking bull. You're going upstairs. So this is where we've got to be a little bit cautious going forward, okay? If we're looking at some kind of V-shaped recovery here, I don't necessarily think we'll get it to the upside immediately. We need to see some kind of carving of a reversal over the next few days, into the next couple of weeks. If we can start to carve out resistance, high lows, compression, some kind of ascending triangle here, then okay, it'll build up the case, build up some positions, and then we begin to break bull, and you're pushing up into Q4, which would be absolutely amazing. So until that day comes, I would be really cautious still, and look for more clues in other data points, primarily the S&P 500. Now, I would love to jump up and down and say this has been the bottom. This has been the flash crash. I was anticipating, but not quite as deep, to be honest with you. We've come down to the bottom BMS. We've come down to the 5-day time frame CoinsKid ribbon. We came down into the beautiful God candle back test. Look where we found support. Beautiful. That's exactly where I thought we would come back down into. I didn't envision this, to be honest with you. So we're looking at some kind of reversal here, and this is something I've spoken about. So descending triangle, flash crash, come back down, create a series of high lows into compression, and then we start to break bull. So we've got to be patient. I'll keep you updated as best I can, because these are the reversal structures and patterns that we've seen every time we've seen these flash crashes in crypto, okay? And again, this could start to roll over and create lower lows and lower highs and so on and so forth. That would be bearish in the short term. What we're looking for is a reversal. We're making higher highs and higher lows, or into the same resistance, okay, which is technically what I'm looking at over the next few weeks. This is the structure we want to see over the next few weeks, where we can build positions confidently, moving our stops up for the big, continuation in this bull market for XRP, okay? So going forward, we've not necessarily lost any indicators. We're, currently holding the BMS on the daily. We're looking pretty tasty, although the big wick is there. It's nasty, it's horrible. We're still holding the BMS on the weekly, on the 5-day time frame, which is really, really important. On the ribbon, which is a really important time frame, we're still inside the BMS, and obviously the CoinsKid ribbon, because anytime historically when we lose that ribbon, it's not a good look. So we're right on cue. We're sort of held inside of it, and obviously this neckline as well for the expanding leading diagonal setup that I've been looking at with yourselves for a long time as well. So have we experienced anything like this before, where right before a break to the upside, we've seen a massive flash crash? Well, on the Binance chart, and you can get this, all you got to do is go to tradingview.com, XRP USD, go to Binance. You will see in 2017 we got this compression that led to expansion. We never lost the ribbon or the BMS. We had that flash crash wick right before going sideways and breaking out in a huge vertical against all of expectations. So is it a case that we're about to rinse repeat that? I would love to tell you that 100% we are. It would be absolutely amazing, because we nailed the buyback on the CoinsKid ribbon, and obviously the God candle backtest, which is pretty much where we're bouncing from right now, which is my primary projection. ABC down into that, and then go into Q4. That was always my primary anticipation, but obviously I didn't see that wick, and I do apologise. So I'll keep you updated as best I can. What I'm trying to say is, over the next few weeks, if we can carve out a structural bottom here, holding the BMS, the 5-day CoinsKid ribbon, and we don't necessarily fall into this wick, we could have a nice little setup for Q4. Failing that, obviously the structure within the price action will give the game away, and obviously the indicators as well. Hope you understand the update. Stay safe, stay tuned. Take care, everyone. Back to a new update in XRP. Bye bye.